October 12, 1944. Grand Coron Foundry, Fisher Body Plant No. 2, Grand Blanc, Michigan. The night shift supervisor watches through thick safety glass as molten steel pours into the massive casting mold, its orange glow illuminating the cavernous factory floor like a second sun. The temperature reads 2,800 degrees Fahrenheit. Sparks cascade upward in spiraling columns, and the roar of the pour drowns out everything except the hammering of his own heartbeat. This isn't ordinary armor plate. This is something the Germans have never seen before. Something that will arrive on the battlefields of Europe in 6 weeks and rewrite the rules of armored warfare. The supervisor's name is stamped on the production order. James P. Waring, Chief Metallurgist, and the formula locked inside his head will soon make American tank crews feel immortal. Waring steps closer to the observation window, his reflection ghosting across the glass. He's 47 years old, graduate of MIT's metallurgy program, 23 years in industrial steel production. His hands, scarred from 1,000 small burns and cuts, hold a clipboard thick with classified specifications. The casting before him represents 9 months of round-the-clock experimentation, failure, breakthrough, and refinement. 9 months of 16-hour days, of rejected batches, of armor plates that cracked under testing, of formulas that produced the wrong carbon gradient, the wrong surface hardness, the wrong ductility in the backing layer. 9 months to solve a problem the Army said was unsolvable. How to make a medium tank's frontal armor impervious to the most lethal anti-tank gun in the German arsenal. The 88mm. Just those two characters cause American tankers to flinch. The legendary Krupp-designed gun that can punch through 3 inches of homogeneous armor plate at 2,000 yards. The gun that has turned hundreds of Sherman tanks into burning coffins across France and Belgium. The gun that makes American crews pray they never see a tiger, never encounter a dug-in flak position, never expose their frontal arc to anything with that distinctive long barrel. Standard Sherman armor, 2.5 inches on the glacis plate, sloped at 56 degrees, can stop rifle caliber rounds, machine gun fire, shell fragments. Against an 88, it might as well be cardboard. Waring knows the statistics because they are burned into his memory. Average Sherman survival rate after first penetrating hit, 18 seconds before ammunition fire. Average crew survival rate, 60%. Tankers have a name for the Sherman, Ronson, after the cigarette lighter. Lights first time, every time. It's dark humor born from dark experience, from climbing out of burning hulls, from watching friends die in vehicles that were supposed to protect them. The Army's answer until now has been to send more Shermans, 5 American tanks for every German Tiger, 10 for every Panther. Overwhelm them with numbers. Accept the losses. It's a doctrine written in blood, and Waring has made it his personal mission to obsolete it. The casting continues its pour. 70 tons of specially formulated steel flowing into the mold that will become the frontal hull plate for tank number 247, serial number 305-6745, designation M4A32. The Jumbo. 4 inches of armor instead of 2.5. But thickness alone isn't the breakthrough. The Germans have thick armor, and it works, but it also makes their tanks slow, fuel-hungry, mechanically unreliable. The Tiger weighs 54 tons. The Jumbo will weigh 42 tons and still be faster. The secret isn't in the thickness. It's in the treatment. Face-hardened armor. The terms sound simple, almost mundane. The reality is anything but. Waring's process involves heating the cast plate to 1,650 degrees Fahrenheit, holding it there for 3 hours, then cooling it in a precisely controlled temperature gradient that hardens the outer face to Brinell 477 hardness, hard enough to shatter armor-piercing shot on impact, while keeping the backing layer at Brinell 280, soft enough to absorb the kinetic energy without spalling fragments into the crew compartment. The cooling process alone takes 18 hours. Rush it, and the plate cracks. Cool it too slowly, and the hardness gradient fails. The margin for error is measured in minutes and degrees. 3 workers in heavy protective gear move across the factory floor, monitoring thermocouples embedded in the mold. Behind them, other casting molds are in various stages of the process, some still glowing red-hot, others cooling to black, still others being broken open to reveal the finished plates. Each plate weighs 4,200 pounds. Each one will be tested, measured, inspected for microscopic flaws, then tested again. Only plates that pass every specification will be welded into tank hulls. The rejection rate is 31%, unconscionably high for normal production, but these aren't normal circumstances. Every plate that passes could mean 5 American lives saved, 10, 20. Every rejected plate is a quality control victory, not a failure. Waring watches the pour complete, the last of the molten steel settling into the mold with a sound like distant thunder. The workers begin the cooling sequence. In 6 hours, they'll know if this batch is viable. In 6 weeks, this particular plate could be rolling through the Siegfried line, taking 88mm hits that would have killed a standard Sherman. And the crew inside, 5 men, someone's sons, someone's husbands, someone's fathers, will live to fight another day. But before any of that happens, Waring has to solve one more problem. The heat treatment process works, but only 67% of the time. 1 in 3 plates still emerges with microscopic cracks in the hardened face layer, invisible stress fractures that will catastrophically fail under the impact of armor-piercing shot. The Army is already building the jumbos, already welding in the armor plates they have, already training crews. Production target, 254 tanks, enough to equip combat commands for the final push into Germany. But Waring needs 380 viable plates to make 254 tanks, and the foundry can only produce 400 in the time available. His margin is razor-thin. He walks to his office, a glass-enclosed cube overlooking the factory floor, and spreads out the test reports from the Aberdeen Proving Ground. Each report shows the results of firing German 88mm ammunition at sample plates mounted at combat angles. The data is clinical, precise, penetration depth, backing layer deformation, spalling patterns, catastrophic failure points. What the data doesn't show is what Waring saw when he visited Aberdeen 3 weeks ago. The actual target plates, mounted on wooden frames, each one bearing the impact scar of a direct hit. The homogeneous armor plates looked as expected. Clean penetrations, 3-inch holes punched straight through, exit wounds larger than entry wounds. The face-hardened plates that failed showed catastrophic fractures radiating from the impact point, the hard outer layer shattering like glass. But the plates that worked, those were beautiful. The 88mm shot had struck with the kinetic energy of a freight train and simply disintegrated. Not deflected, not penetrated, destroyed on impact. The armor absorbed the hit with nothing more than a crater an inch deep and a network of fine stress cracks in the hardened layer. Behind that hardened face, the softer backing layer had deformed slightly, spreading the impact energy across several square feet. No penetration, no spalling. The crew would have been shaken, half-deafened by the impact, possibly bruised by the shock transmitted through the hull, but alive and operational. Waring had run his hand across the impact crater, feeling the rough texture where armor-piercing shot had met face-hardened steel and lost. In that moment, he knew the formula worked. Now he just had to make it work consistently. The problem is the carbon gradient. Face hardening requires a precise carbon concentration profile through the thickness of the plate. High carbon at the outer surface for maximum hardness, gradually decreasing to low carbon at the backing layer for ductility. The casting process introduces carbon, but not uniformly. The heat treatment redistributes it, but the redistribution depends on exact temperature control, exact timing, exact cooling rates. Change any one variable, and the gradient shifts. Waring has been adjusting the formula incrementally, tweaking the casting temperature by 5 degrees, the holding time by 10 minutes, the cooling rate by 2 degrees per hour. Each adjustment requires a test plate, a week of processing, a trip to Aberdeen for live fire testing. Each failure means starting over, means one less viable plate in inventory, means one more Sherman crew that won't get the protection they need. The pressure is enormous, but Waring has felt pressure before. What drives him isn't the Army's deadlines or the production quotas. It's the faces and the photographs he keeps in his desk drawer. Photographs sent by grateful tank commanders whose crews survived hits that should have killed them, thanks to improved armor specifications Waring developed earlier in the war. He has 17 photographs. He's determined to have more. The foundry floor is controlled chaos. 3 more pours are scheduled tonight. 3 more chances to produce viable plates. Waring has authorized a modification to the cooling sequence based on microscopic analysis of the last batch of failures. The stress fractures all originated at a depth of 1.2 inches, right where the carbon gradient transitions from high to medium concentration. His hypothesis: the transition is too abrupt, creating a boundary layer that fractures under thermal stress. Solution: extend the holding time by 15 minutes and reduce the initial cooling rate by 3 degrees per hour, allowing the carbon to diffuse more gradually through the transition zone. It's an educated guess backed by metallurgical theory and 23 years of experience, but it's still a guess. He won't know if it works until the plates are tested. And time is running out. A supervisor approaches with a clipboard. Another production issue. Another decision required. The manganese supplier has changed formulation slightly, which could affect the steel's response to heat treatment. Waring approves switching to the backup supplier, even though it will cost 3 days of production time. He's learned that shortcuts in metallurgy don't save time. They waste it catastrophically. Better to delay now than to produce plates that fail in combat. Across the factory floor, the first casting of the night is beginning its controlled cooling. Inside that massive mold, steel is solidifying. Crystal structures are forming. Carbon atoms are migrating through the lattice according to the laws of thermodynamics and the specifications Waring has written. In 18 hours, they'll extract the plate, and in 3 weeks, it will either stop an 88 mm round or shatter under the impact. Everything depends on the precision of the process, the accuracy of the formula, the skill of the workers executing it. Waring returns to the observation window. Another pour is beginning, the molten steel glowing like captured sunlight. He thinks about the crews who will fight in the jumbos, who will trust their lives to the armor he's creating. He thinks about the German tankers who will fire at what looks like a standard Sherman and watch their shot disintegrate against armor that shouldn't exist. He thinks about the moment. It's coming. He knows it's coming. When the first jumbo takes its first frontal hit and the crew realizes they've survived something that should have killed them. That moment is still 7 weeks away, still unformed in the future, but Waring can see it clearly, because he's built it, atom by atom, formula by formula, in a foundry in Michigan while the war rages an ocean away. The casting molds cool. The factory runs through the night, and somewhere in the steel taking shape under his supervision is the difference between death and survival for men he'll never meet. December 19th, 1944. Port of Boston, Massachusetts. Captain Richard Dick Irwin stands on the dock at the Boston Army Base, watching the last of the jumbos being loaded onto the Liberty ship SS John W. Brown. Even from 100 yards away, the tanks look different, heavier, more purposeful, their welded hull seams thicker than standard Shermans. Irwin is 32, 5U veteran of the Army's Armored Force, commander of Baker Company, 4th Armored Division. He's been tanking since the North African campaign, survived the blockage in Normandy, fought through France. He's lost 11 tanks and 37 men. The mathematics of attrition have taught him that armor is a temporary condition and survival is mostly luck. The Army has given him 20 jumbos, 20 tanks out of the 254 being shipped to Europe, allocated based on Baker Company's combat record and upcoming mission profile. Irwin had been briefed on the jumbo specifications 3 days ago at Fort Knox. 4 inches of frontal armor, face-hardened, rated to defeat 88 mm armor-piercing shot at 1,000 yards. He'd listened to the briefing with the skepticism of a man who has watched armor plate fail under fire, who has climbed out of burning tanks, who has written too many letters to too many families. The Army promises a lot of things. Armor that stops 88 sounds like another promise headed for disappointment. But then they'd shown him the test footage from Aberdeen. Black and white film, grainy and overexposed, showing a jumbo hull section mounted on a test stand. An 88 mm gun fires from 800 yards. The camera shakes from the concussion. When the smoke clears, the armor plate is still intact, just a crater on the surface. They fire again. Same result. They fire a third time. Impact point 3 inches from the previous hits. The plate holds. Irwin had asked to see the footage again. Then a third time. Something in his understanding of armored warfare had shifted in that darkened briefing room, watching armor do something armor wasn't supposed to do. Now he watches his jumbos being loaded, each tank weighing 42 tons, each one representing hundreds of hours of foundry work, metallurgical science, engineering precision. They look like regular Shermans, same 75 mm gun, same suspension, same general profile, but the front hull is visibly thicker. The glacis plates slope more steeply. To a casual observer, they are just another variant. To Irwin, they are a fundamental change in the calculus of tank combat. If the armor works as advertised, he can attack positions he would have bypassed, take hits he would have evaded, fight battles he would have avoided. His crews are already calling them turtles because of the heavy frontal armor. Some of the men are enthusiastic, younger tankers who haven't yet learned that armor is ultimately just a layer of steel between you and physics. Others are reserved, veterans like Sergeant Paul McKinney, who has survived 3 tank kills and doesn't trust promises. McKinney is standing near the dock office, smoking a cigarette, watching the loading with the same expression he might watch the weather, acknowledging it's happening but withholding judgment about what it means. Irwin walks over. "What do you think, Sergeant?" McKinney takes a drag, exhales slowly. "I think it's still a Sherman, sir, which means it'll still burn if we take a hit to the engine deck. Still has ammo stored in the sponsons. Still sounds like a Sherman, smells like a Sherman, probably dies like a Sherman. But the frontal armor? Will be nice if it works, sir, but I've learned not to count on things until they prove themselves." McKinney drops the cigarette, crushes it under his boot. How many times we're being told the new equipment will make the difference? The better radios, the wet ammunition storage, the improved optics. It all helps, but an 88 still goes through standard armor like it's not there. If these plates are different, really different, we'll find out when someone shoots at us. Until then, it's just theory. Irwin understands the skepticism. He shares it, but has also done the mathematics. The 4th Armored is being attached to Patton's 3rd Army for the final push into Germany. They'll be facing prepared German defenses, dug-in anti-tank guns, Panthers and Tigers in hull-down positions. In a standard Sherman, that kind of fighting is a casualty equation. Advance until you're hit, hope you can bail out, bring up another tank. The Germans call it quality versus quantity. 1 Tiger equals 5 Shermans. The Americans call it acceptable losses and send 5 Shermans. The Jumbo changes the equation. Maybe. The loading continues through the afternoon. Each tank is driven onto the ship's cargo deck, chained to anchor points, covered with tops and camouflage netting. The SS John W. Brown will sail in a convoy heading for Le Havre, 7 to 9 days crossing depending on weather and U-boats. From Le Havre, the Jumbos will be transported by rail to forward assembly areas in eastern France, where they'll be distributed to armored divisions preparing for the winter offensive. Irwin has already studied the tactical employment guidelines for the Jumbo. Priority mission: lead tank in breakthrough operations. The heavy frontal armor makes it ideal for spearheading attacks against fortified positions, absorbing fire that would disable standard Shermans, creating openings for following elements. Secondary mission: mobile pillbox for defensive operations, using the armor to hold key terrain against counterattacks. The 75mm gun is unchanged, adequate against most German armor at typical combat ranges, but outclassed by the Tiger's 88mm and the Panther's 75mm in long-range duels. The Jumbo isn't designed to hunt enemy tanks. It's designed to take hits while accomplishing the mission. That distinction matters. American tank doctrine emphasizes speed, maneuverability, and combined arms coordination over pure armor protection. The Sherman was designed to be fast, reliable, easy to produce, easy to maintain. The Jumbo maintains those characteristics while adding survivability. It's still not a Tiger. Slower than a Tiger, less firepower than a Tiger, narrower tracks than a Tiger. But it doesn't have to be a Tiger. It just has to be a Sherman that doesn't die on the first hit. The sun sets over Boston Harbor, orange light reflecting off the water and the hulls of the waiting ships. Irwin's company will sail tomorrow, part of the endless flow of men and equipment feeding the European theater. His tank, Jumbo number 12, he's decided to name it Ironside, is already secured in the Brown's cargo hold. He's arranged for his crew to stay together. Corporal James Delaney as gunner, Private First Class Robert Chen as loader, Private Eddie Kowalski as driver, Technician 5th Grade Michael Russo as bow gunner. They've been together since Normandy, survived 3 tanks between them. They've learned to trust each other's competence, to communicate without words, to function as a single organism when the shooting starts. Tomorrow they'll board the ship and begin the journey back to the war. In 2 weeks, maybe 3, they'll take Ironside into combat and discover whether the armor lives up to the specifications, whether Waring's metallurgy can stop Krupp's 88mm, whether the face-hardened steel will shatter German shot or shatter under German shot. Irwin walks back toward the base headquarters, past rows of trucks and jeeps and half-tracks, past mountains of crated supplies, past the organized chaos of an army in motion. Somewhere in Michigan, foundries are still pouring steel, still heat-treating plates, still producing the armor that might keep him alive. He doesn't know about wearing, doesn't know about the months of experimentation and the pressure and the rejected batches and the incremental improvements. He just knows that 20 tanks with better armor are heading to Europe, and is in command of them. The implications are just beginning to register. If the armor works, if the frontal arc is truly impervious to 88mm fire, then the entire tactical playbook changes. He can advance across open ground without waiting for smoke screens or artillery suppression. He can assault fortified positions from the front instead of maneuvering for flanking shots. He can hold terrain against counterattacks without retreating to cover. All the careful, cautious, casual-to-conscious tactics he's learned might become obsolete. Aggression might become viable again. Speed might matter more than caution. It's a seductive thought and a dangerous one. Armor invites overconfidence, and overconfidence invites mistakes. But armor that actually works, that's something different. That's not overconfidence. That's capability. The SS John W. Brown rides at anchor, low in the water under the weight of 20 jumbos and their accompanying supply vehicles. Tomorrow it sails. In 10 days, Irwin will find out if the theory translates to reality, if the metallurgy holds up, if the face-hardened armor performs under combat conditions. Until then, it's just a 20-tank experiment in applied physics and engineering, heading toward a battlefield that will test every specification to destruction. January 8, 1945. Outskirts of Hellesheim, Alsace, France. The jumbo idles behind a row of destroyed buildings, engine rumbling, every surface covered in frozen mud and frost. Inside the tank, Captain Irwin studies the map spread across his lap, comparing it to the view through the periscope. Hellesheim is 2 kilometers ahead, a small village-turned-German strongpoint, defended by elements of the 10th SS Panzer Division. Intelligence reports dug-in anti-tank guns, at least 2 Panthers, extensive minefields. Standard Sherman tactics would be to bypass and isolate. Today's mission is to attack directly through, clearing a path for the following infantry. Baker Company's 20 jumbos are staged in a tree line, dispersed to minimize the effect of artillery, engines idling to keep the crews warm in the sub-freezing temperatures. They've been in combat for 3 weeks since arriving in theater, mostly small engagements, probing attacks, defensive stands. The jumbos have taken hits, multiple hits, and the results have exceeded even Irwin's cautiously optimistic expectations. Yesterday, Sergeant McKinney's tank took 2 88mm rounds in the frontal glacis at 600 yards. Both shots ricocheted, leaving impact craters and stress cracks, but no penetrations. McKinney's crew reported feeling like they'd been hit with a sledgehammer, ears ringing, vision blurred from the shock, but the tank remained operational and they continued the attack. 3 other jumbos have similar stories. Multiple frontal hits, 0 penetrations, 100% crew survival rate. The Germans are learning to avoid frontal engagements with the jumbos, targeting tracks and engine decks, waiting for flank shots, which is exactly what American tankers have been doing against Tigers and Panthers for the past year, avoiding frontal armor, maneuvering for side shots. The tactical dynamic has reversed. The hunters have become the hunted, at least from certain angles. Irwin keys the company radio net. All Baker elements, this is Baker 6. Execute phase line alpha in 5 minutes. 1st platoon leads, 2nd platoon echeloned right, 3rd platoon reserve. Speed is essential. Armor has proven effective against frontal fire. Use it. Acknowledge. The acknowledgements come back one by one, each tank commander confirming receipt. Irwin switches to his crew intercom. Delaney, you see that church steeple at 11 o'clock? Got it, Captain. That's the aiming point. Suspected anti-tank gun position behind the stone wall to the left of it. We'll be taking fire as soon as we clear this tree line. Stay on target. Roger. Kowalski, the driver, shifts in his seat. Captain, we going straight at them. Straight at them. Private. Armor's built for this. Trust it. The words sound confident, but Irwin feels the familiar pre-combat tension, the tightness in his chest, the hyper-awareness of every sound and sensation. The jumbo has proven itself in small engagements, But this is different. This is a deliberate assault against prepared defenses, the exact scenario the tank was designed for. If the armor fails here, if a well-aimed 88mm finds a weak point or defeats the face hardening, his crew dies and the entire tactical premise collapses. But if it works, if the armor holds, then Baker Company punches through the German defenses and opens a corridor for the infantry. The mission succeeds, casualties stay low, and the Jumbo proves it can do what no Sherman variant has done before: absorb punishment from the heaviest German guns and keep fighting. Irwin checks his watch. All elements, move out. 12 Jumbos surge forward from the tree line, spreading into assault formation, tracks churning frozen ground. The village of Hellesheim is visible ahead. Stone buildings clustered around the church, roads lined with bare trees, fields blanketed in dirty snow. It looks peaceful, pastoral, completely ordinary except for the destroyed vehicles at the edge of town, 2 burnt-out American trucks from a previous failed attack, a knocked-out German half-track. The wreckage marks the defensive perimeter. Irwin's Jumbo leads the center element, moving at 15 miles per hour, turret traversing slowly as Delaney searches for targets. The bow gunner, Russo, is scanning through his periscope, hand on the .30 caliber trigger. Chen has a 75mm high explosive round loaded, ready for immediate fire. Range to village, 800 meters. Kowalski reports. They're in the open now, exposed. No cover except speed and armor. This is the moment German anti-tank gunners wait for. Enemy tanks silhouetted against open ground. Perfect firing solution. Somewhere in Hellesheim, a crew is tracking them through gun sights, calculating lead and drop, preparing to fire. The 88mm shot arrives without warning. No muzzle flash visible, just the supersonic crack of the round passing and the enormous crash of impact against Irwin's frontal glacis. The tank rocks backward from the kinetic transfer. 42 tons of steel absorbing the equivalent of a freight train collision compressed into a 6-inch circle. Inside the hull, the noise is indescribable, a metallic shriek that overwhelms hearing, a physical blow that rattles every piece of equipment, a shock that travels through the deck plates and up through the crew's bodies. Irwin's head snaps forward against the padded periscope guard. His vision whites out for a second. His ears register only a high-pitched ringing. But the tank is still moving. The engine is still running. No fire, no smoke, no penetration. The face-hardened armor has done its job, shattering the 88mm round on impact, distributing the energy across the plate. There's a crater in the glacis. Irwin can see it through the periscope. A rough divot maybe 2 inches deep. But the armor held. Everyone okay? Irwin's voice sounds distant through the ringing in his ears. Acknowledgements come back, shaky but functional. Kowalski has maintained speed. Delaney is searching for the gun position. Chen is checking the ammunition storage, making sure nothing broke loose from the impact shock. There. Delaney's voice is tight with adrenaline. Stone wall, left of the church, muzzle flash. Fire. The 75mm box. The breech recoils. Spent casing ejects with a clang. Chen already has the next round sliding into the chamber. Through the periscope, Irwin sees the high explosive shell impact the stone wall, sending fragments and dust billowing. Whether they hit the gun is unclear, but they've suppressed it temporarily. Other Jumbos are taking fire now. Irwin sees Lieutenant Morrison's tank, Jumbo number 4, get hit twice in quick succession. Both rounds striking the frontal arc. Morrison keeps advancing. Sergeant Kinney's tank takes a hit to the turret mantlet, armor-piercing shot deflecting upward off the curved surface. No penetrations. No kills. The company is 300 meters from the village now. Still advancing. Still taking fire. Still operational. The Germans are learning what the test data at Aberdeen already proved. Frontal attacks against the Jumbo are ineffective. The 88mm, the most feared anti-tank gun in the European theater, the weapon that has killed hundreds of Allied tanks, cannot defeat 4 inches of properly hardened, properly sloped armor. The physics are unambiguous. The steel is harder than the shot. The kinetic energy disperses across the face-hardened surface instead of concentrating into penetration. The backing layer absorbs what the hard face cannot destroy. German doctrine is to switch targets, to fire at tracks or engine compartments, to wait for flank shots. But the Jumbos are advancing too quickly for careful aiming, and they are retaining fire effectively, suppressing the gun positions. The assault is working precisely as designed. Baker Company reaches the village perimeter. Irwin's jumbo crashes through a wooden fence, scattering posts and barbed wire, and enters the main street. Buildings loom on both sides, windows shattered, walls pocked with bullet holes. A German soldier appears in a doorway, fires a Panzerfaust, the shaped charge infantry anti-tank weapon. The rocket streaks toward the turret but impacts the sandbags stacked on the engine deck, exploding harmlessly against the improvised applique armor. Bow gun, building on the right. Russo opens fire, the .30 caliber chattering, traces arcing through windows and doorways. Answering fire comes from multiple positions, rifle shots, machine gun bursts, the distinctive crack of a high-velocity gun. The Jumbo takes another hit, this one to the side hull, penetrating the thinner armor and entering the sponson. But the hit is above the crew compartment, punching through storage bins and spare track links. The tank keeps moving. They're inside the German defensive perimeter now. Infantry combat mixed with armor combat, confusion and noise and the constant threat of close-range attack. Irwin can see other Jumbos maneuvering through the streets, engaging targets, taking hits, surviving. The radio is chaos, multiple voices, conflicting reports, urgent calls for support. But underlying the chaos is a consistent pattern. The Jumbos are advancing, the Germans are retreating, the armor is holding. A Panther appears at the end of the street, hull down behind rubble, 75mm gun trained directly at Irwin's Jumbo. This is the nightmare scenario. German armor with better optics, better guns, better crew training, in a prepared position with a perfect firing solution. The Panther fires. The shot hits the Jumbo's glacis dead center, exactly where the previous 88mm round impacted. The cratering effect is cumulative. The face-hardened layer is already stressed from the first hit, microfractures radiating through the surface. But the armor still holds. The second shot expands the crater, deepens it, creates more stress cracks. Still no penetration. Delaney has the Panther centered in his sights. Identified. Fire. The 75mm round hits the Panther's glacis and ricochets. American guns are outclassed against German frontal armor, just as German guns are now outclassed against American face-hardened armor. But the Jumbo's 75mm can penetrate Panthers from the side, and Lieutenant Morrison's tank is maneuvering for exactly that shot. Irwin sees Morrison's Jumbo appear from a side street, firing on the move, hitting the Panther's thinner side hull. The German tank brews up immediately, crew bailing out as flames erupt from the hatches. The engagement continues for another 20 minutes, building-to-building fighting, infantry and armor intermixed, Germans retreating through the village and re-establishing positions, Americans advancing and clearing structures. By noon, Baker Company has secured Hellesheim. The cost, 0 Jumbos destroyed, 2 damaged badly enough to require depot-level repair, 14 crewmen with minor injuries from impact shock and concussion, 0 fatalities. The armor has proven itself conclusively, under the worst possible conditions, against the best German anti-tank weapons. Irwin climbs out of his Jumbo after the fighting ends, needing to see the damage with his own eyes. The frontal glacis has 3 impact craters, the largest 4 inches across and an inch deep. Stress cracks radiate from each crater like spider webs frozen in steel. The armor is damaged, will need replacement, but it didn't fail. His crew is alive because of those 4 inches of face-hardened steel, because of Waring's formula, because of months of metallurgical experimentation in a Michigan foundry. Sergeant Kinney walks over, expression unreadable. He studies the damage for a long moment, runs his hand over the cratered surface, then looks at Irwin. Sir, I take back what I said in Boston. This armor is different. Really different. I've never taken hits like that and walked away. Other crews are gathering, looking at the damaged Jumbos, comparing impact craters, sharing stories of shots that should have been fatal but weren't. There's a shift in attitude, a change in the way they're carrying themselves. Tank crews learn to live with vulnerability, to accept that armor is temporary protection, and luck eventually runs out. But the Jumbo has changed that equation. For the first time in the war, American tankers have frontal armor that actually works against the weapons designed to defeat it. The implications ripple through the division. Commanders start planning more aggressive operations, assaults they would have avoided with standard Shermans. Crews who receive Jumbos feel a mixture of relief and invincibility, dangerous emotions in combat, but understandable. For months they've been the under-armored underdogs, trading numbers for quality, accepting casualties as inevitable. Now they have parity, at least from the front. German tankers and anti-tank gun crews are also adapting. Intelligence reports show Germans avoiding frontal engagements with the distinctive jumbo silhouette, focusing on tracks and flanks, using terrain to force the Americans into positions where the heavy frontal armor is irrelevant. The tactical dance continues, but the moves have changed. The jumbo isn't invincible, no tank is, but it's survivable in situations where standard Shermans are not. Over the next 2 months, Baker Company's jumbos will fight through the Siegfried Line, participate in the Rhine crossing, advance into Germany. They'll take hundreds of hits to their frontal armor, lose several tanks to flank shots and mobility kills, lose crew members to artillery and snipers and accidents. War is still war, and metal, even face-hardened, properly heat-treated, metallurgically optimized metal, can only protect against certain threats from certain angles. But the statistics are undeniable. Jumbo crews have an 87% survival rate after penetrating hits, compared to 60% for standard Shermans. Mission success rates are higher. Casualty rates are lower. The tanks designated to lead breakthrough operations are actually surviving those missions. The Army's investment in better armor, Waring's months of experimentation, the production challenges and the metallurgical refinements, all of it is validated every time a jumbo takes an 88mm hit to the glacis and keeps fighting. March 15, 1945. Grand Couronne Foundry, Grand Blanc, Michigan. James Waring stands on the factory floor, reading the after-action report from the 4th Armored Division. The document is technical, clinical, filled with statistics and engagement summaries. But between the lines, Waring reads the stories, crews who survived hits they shouldn't have survived, tanks that continued operating despite damage that would have destroyed standard Shermans, missions accomplished because the armor allowed aggressive tactics that would have been suicidal otherwise. The face hardening process is now running at 89% yield, only 1 in 9 plates rejected instead of 1 in 3. The breakthrough came from the extended holding time and modified cooling rate, exactly as Waring had theorized. Production has accelerated. The Army has requested an additional run of 100 plates for late war variants, though the war in Europe is clearly entering its final phase and demand for new armor is declining. Waring has received commendations, citations, formal recognition from Army Ordnance. His filed patents on the heat treatment process, secured peacetime applications for the metallurgy. But what matters more than any of that are the photographs that continue to arrive. Tank crews posing in front of battle-damaged jumbos, impact craters visible on the glacis, crew members grinning or solemn or simply present, alive, because the armor worked when it needed to work. He has 38 photographs now. 38 crews who specifically wrote to tell him they survived because of his armor. That number doesn't include the crews who never knew his name, who fought and survived and moved on without realizing that someone in Michigan had spent months perfecting the steel that protected them. The real number is higher, maybe much higher. Waring will never know exactly how many lives the face hardening process saved, but he knows it's more than 0. And for an engineer, that's the only metric that truly matters. The foundry continues its work. Even with the war winding down, orders continue for armor plate, for replacement hulls, for the maintenance and repair pipeline. The casting molds still glow orange with molten steel. The heat treatment ovens still run their 18-hour cycles. The workers still monitor temperatures and cooling rates with the precision the process demands. It's routine now, no longer experimental. Just another production line in a factory that has been producing armor for 3 years. But Waring remembers when it wasn't routine, when every plate was an experiment, when the pressure was immense and the stakes were measured in lives. He remembers the rejected batches and the stress fractures and the incremental improvements. He remembers the moment at Aberdeen when he saw the test plate with 3 88mm impact craters and no penetrations, when he knew the formula worked. A supervisor approaches with production figures for the week. Waring reviews them, signs off, moves on to the next decision. The work continues. Steel still needs to be poured. Plates still need to be heat-treated. Armor still needs to be produced to specification. The war isn't over yet, and even when it is, the lessons learned will continue to matter. The metallurgy of face-hardened armor will influence tank design for decades, will establish principles that carry forward into the next generation of armored vehicles. But on March 15, 1945, in a foundry in Michigan. Waring is just a metallurgist checking production reports and monitoring quality control. The Jumbos are in Europe, fighting their way into Germany. The crews are using the armor, trusting it, surviving because of it. And somewhere on a battlefield Waring will never see, an 88mm round strikes a Jumbo's glacis and disintegrates against face-hardened steel, and 5 men live to fight another day. That's the engineering Waring cares about. That's the achievement that matters. Not the patents or the commendations or the technical papers he'll write after the war. Just the simple, profound fact that his steel stopped German shot, that his formula made American tanks survivable, that his work, invisible, unglamorous, conducted far from the fighting, kept men alive. The casting molds cool. The factory runs through the night. And in the steel taking shape under precise temperature control and careful metallurgical science is the difference between death and survival, between vulnerability and protection, between a Sherman that burns on the first hit and a Jumbo that takes 3 hits and keeps advancing. April 30th, 1945. Outskirts of Munich, Germany. Captain Irwin's Jumbo Ironside sits in a farmyard near Munich, engine idling, covered in mud and carbon scoring, and the accumulated wear 4 months of continuous combat. The war in Europe is ending. Everyone can feel it. The collapsing German resistance, the rumors of surrender, the sense that the violence is exhausting itself. Baker Company's 20 Jumbos are down to 14 operational, the rest knocked out by flank shots, mobility kills, mechanical failures. But those 14 have taken cumulative hundreds of hits to their frontal armor and survived. Irwin climbs out to inspect the glacis one more time. The armor is a moonscape of craters and stress cracks, some overlapping where multiple shots hit the same area, some deep enough that Irwin can see the color change in the steel where the face-hardened layer has been partially defeated. But none of them penetrated. Not one. Every crater is a moment when his crew should have died and didn't, when physics and metallurgy and engineering conspired to keep them alive. He thinks about the battles they've fought, the positions they've assaulted, the missions they've led. Without the Jumbo's armor, Baker Company would have suffered 50% casualties. That's the statistical probability based on similar operations conducted by standard Sherman units. Instead, their casualty rate was 12%, almost all from flank hits or artillery or infantry weapons. The frontal armor made them aggressive when aggression was needed, confident when confidence meant success, protective when protection meant survival. Sergeant Kinney approaches, also studying the battle damage. "Sir, we're bringing these back to the States." "Some of them. Army wants to study the armor, see how it held up under sustained combat. The rest will probably get scrapped." Kinney shakes his head slowly. "Shame. These tanks kept us alive. Feels wrong to just cut them up for scrap." Irwin understands. There's a bond between tankers and their vehicles, especially vehicles that prove trustworthy under fire. Ironside isn't just steel and mechanics. It's the sum of every engagement, every close call, every moment when the armor held and the crew lived. It's a partner in survival. The war will end in days, maybe hours. The Jumbos will be mothballed, studied, eventually replaced by new designs that incorporate the lessons learned. Face hardening will become standard practice in armor production. The M26 Pershing, the next-generation American heavy tank, already uses variations of Waring's heat treatment process. The principles will propagate forward, will influence Cold War armor development, will establish doctrinal approaches to tank survivability. But in April 1945, those future developments are still unwritten. What exists is 14 battle-scarred Jumbos and their crews, alive and operational, having proven that American engineering can match German metallurgy, that medium tanks can have heavy armor, that face hardening can defeat 88mm shot. Irwin runs his hand across Ironside's glacis, feeling the rough texture of the impact craters. Somewhere in Michigan, a metallurgist named Waring perfected the formula that created this steel. Somewhere in the industrial infrastructure of wartime America, workers poured castings and monitored temperatures and executed the process that hardened this armor. And somewhere in the physics of high-velocity impacts, the face-hardened layer shattered armor-piercing shot instead of being penetrated by it. All of that, the science, the engineering, the production, the metallurgy, came together in this piece of steel, in this specific tank, at specific moments when German guns fired and the armor held and Irwin's crew survived. That's what engineering means at its most fundamental level, the practical application of scientific principles to achieve human outcomes. In this case, the outcome was life instead of death, survival instead of destruction. The farmyard is quiet except for the idle rumble of engines and the distant sound of artillery, still fighting somewhere, still dying somewhere, but moving farther away each day. The war is ending. The Jumbos will be remembered as a footnote, a variant, 254 tanks out of tens of thousands of Shermans produced. But for the crews who fought in them, who trusted the armor and had that trust validated under fire, they were transformative. Irwin climbs back into Ironside. The crew is ready to move out. One more mission, one more advance, one more engagement in a war that's already won but hasn't yet officially ended. The Jumbo's engine revs. The tracks begin to turn. And on the glacis, the crated, stress-fractured, but undefeated armor bears witness to the difference that metallurgy, engineering, and one man's determination to make better steel can make in the outcome of war.